911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call Med Control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. All right, welcome back to Dispatched Dysfunctional. If you're new here, this isn't a show about tactics, protocols, or war stories. And if you've been here for a while, you already know this, and it isn't a feel-good podcast. This is about what the job actually does to people, not just on shift, but after. After the adrenaline fades, after the station doors close, after everyone assumes you're just fine. Job follows you home, it changes how you sleep, how you talk, how much patience you have left, and how quiet things can get when nobody's asking you how you're really doing. This show isn't about one person's story. It's about a shared experience, what this job takes from us over time, and how we keep showing up anyway. Jimmy, I'm glad you're here. Today we have a guest, Mr. Jimmy Apple, or as everyone else knows him, the EMS Avenger. Before we get into anything heavy, I want to start the way I always do. Not titles, not credentials, not a resume, but for people listening who may not know you as the EMS Avenger, who are you inside the job?
Inside the job?
Yes, sir.
I'm a pediatric and pediatric and neonatal critical care paramedic.
I got you.
I work for a local children's hospital. I had 20 years of 911 experience, but that's what I do right now, pediatric critical care transport.
That's awesome. Now, what about outside the job?
Is that what you asked me? I thought you said inside the job.
First it was inside, now outside. Trying to get the whole picture.
Okay, so outside the job, I am a husband and a dad and a granddad.
Oh, wow.
And I am a hiker and an avid reader. I'm a lover of sci-fi and fantasy novels and a lover of 80s hair metal. I like to grill. I like to go out and, experience and travel. And I'm not much for traveling, like to see like cities and things like that. I'm much more into traveling and seeing like natural wonders, getting out into the wilderness and nature. So
that's awesome. That's a hell of a hobby right there. And before we go any further, what do you want people to take away today from this conversation?
Well, I don't know what the conversation is going to lead. So it may be that I have to do some damage control after it's over. But, ultimately, people just need to realize that people like myself, who they see kind of public facing, are just people, and people who are in the middle of their own growth trajectory as well. I'm in the middle of my growth trajectory, and I certainly do look back at, things that I have said or, content that I've made that I wish I had made differently or said differently or wish I had behaved differently. And, ultimately I'm trying to practice what I preach, which is that saving lives begins with kindness.
Yes, sir. And actually, I'm sure everyone will agree with me as well as on this. I appreciate your videos. Your educational content is by far some of the best I've seen in a long time.
Thank you.
You take the passion, you take the expertise, and you merge them together and make them into something people can actually understand and interpret. And you don't sit there and bullshit people. You're literally here with facts and, everything, references, everything you need. So
thank you.
On that note, what do people misunderstand most about you because of your online presence?
There's a couple of things. The first is that I'm looking for clicks and views because I must get paid a whole bunch of money because I'm online, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I actually stopped monetization on TikTok. It doesn't amount to much. People who are posting kitten videos could get more viewers than I do. I have a very specific lane that I occupy, which is data-driven, evidence-based medicine for emergency medical providers. And you're not going to get 1 million followers based solely on that. I'm not personality-driven. I don't make a lot of funny content. And so there's a very specific lane that I occupy. I'm very dedicated to that lane. And I was never monetized on Facebook or Instagram. I was monetized on TikTok for a little while, but I just decided it was better to have credibility than it was for people to suspect that it was a profit center for me, which it never was. I mean, at its best, sometimes it would pay my car payment. Where I get opportunity for making some money is, if an educational company wants to use my content and award CEs or, honorariums for speaking at conferences and that sort of thing. So the content that I deliver on Reels and on the social media, that is solely because I believe in the content and I believe in getting evidence-based medicine into the hands of the providers themselves. And because I'm passionate about this, it's something that I'm interested in. So that's one of the biggest misunderstandings, is that I'm in it for engagement.
Yes, sir. I actually worked with a few other podcasters offshore, and they were the same way. They just wanted their content to be seen. They did not want the monetization, and so I understand that wholeheartedly. I actually had worked with the sleepy paramedic for the longest time, and me and him were actually partners. And he dropped TikTok due to the monetization.
Yeah. Yeah, I still talk to him every now and then.
Yeah, he's a very good guy. I love him to death.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to say this out loud for the listeners because it matters, and you pretty much said this out front. You wrote this on your intake form that I have everyone fill out. I'm not here with my own agenda. I'll go where the interview takes me. This is how it works. You don't need to steer the show. You don't need to perform. You don't need to protect anyone's feelings. And we'll follow the conversation where it needs to go and how it goes. And on that note, mine's a lot of the mindset and the mental capacities of first response. So for that mindset that you wrote there, is that something you had to learn over time, or is that something that just automatically came to you?
The notion of not having an agenda?
Yes, sir. I know it sounds weird, but
I mean, I don't know if I've thought about that philosophy anymore. When I'm a guest on somebody's show, I simply want to be accommodating to what they want to talk about. Also, you can get bored with hearing yourself talk about the same things over and over again. And so coming in with an agenda, unless you really have something that you're working on, the closest thing to an agenda that I have right now, is talking about best practices.
Yes, sir.
In fact, the closest thing I have to an agenda right now is just talking about the keynote that I'm taking around the country right now, which is called "Kids Are Little Adults." Focusing on dispelling the dogma around pediatric care. But outside of that, I think it's important to talk about what other people want to talk about, and most of my content has reflected that.
Yes, sir. Yep. So let's go ahead and get started on mine, shall we? So everybody has a moment in the job, where it stops being exciting, starts being heavy. What was that first moment you realized this job was different than you expected?
Was different than I expected. That's a good question. It didn't take. I think when we started, I think there was somebody who used to call very frequently, and the first time I ever responded to him, he wanted me to administer him his enema, his liquid enema, and that was the first time I was like, why would somebody call for that? Like, you can just reach around and do that, and it didn't take very long, to start getting all the types of calls that everyone else gets, that are not necessarily high acuity, but it didn't take long at all, weeks.
Right.
but I don't think that it ever really affected me very much. I was never one to like negotiate with it, and I think that's something that we as first responders have a hard time with, is that it's low hanging low hanging fruit to negotiate with the reasons for calling. And there's really no good that can come from it, doing it on scene. It just creates bad feelings between you and the patient. It creates hostility in you that you can't resolve. It doesn't make the patient change their behavior. I remember as riding on a clinical with someone who I rode with quite frequently, and seeing him with a patient and attempting to exert control over them, telling them like, you better, or something like that, and seeing how the patient really just didn't respect that order. And I realized, we actually have no authority over these patients.
Yes, sir.
And so the notion that we would negotiate with them or attempt to exert control or leverage over them is actually a risk, because if it goes badly, you just end up looking silly. And I just resolved to myself not to get into power struggles with patients. So I just never really did negotiate that minefield of why people called. And in saying that, I'm not trying to virtue signal or anything like that. It's just, just how my journey played out. It just was never important to me to do that.
And I agree with you on that. Is, as you were saying, with our frequent callers, I had a lady, same way. She would just call just for random crap. And it hit me, though, because she wound up dying, and all she wanted was the human touch. She wanted human contact because no one else would contact her. No one else would talk to her. That's when it hit me darkest. But, and
I'll add, too, that I just found that I found it to be freeing not to worry about that sort of stuff. There are so many things, so many stressors we have on the job, and worrying about the reasons why people call. It's kind of the philosophy, I have 99 problems, and that doesn't need to be one of them.
Yeah.
And I also found that when you approach patients a certain way, that sometimes you actually can resolve some of the reasons for why they're calling. We had one guy that used to call all the time. He was morbidly obese and, was somebody who had a hard time getting around his house. And if he fell, he couldn't get up.
Oh.
And there was one time that we got there and we had to help him get up. And it took, this guy was somewhere around 650 or 700 pounds. And so when we would get there, the two of us couldn't do it on our own. And so it would require, we would have to call for an engine or something like that to help us. And in waiting one time for the engine to show up, I just had a conversation with him, a friendly conversation, a concerned conversation. And it occurred to me, I was like, hey, what if me and maybe a couple other people came out here on a weekend and we installed handles around your house that you could reach, handles that not only you could grab to help you get up, but handles you could keep a hold of as you got around. And he was like, man, I would love that. And so a local hardware store donated the materials, and me and a couple other people went out there and we just installed this stuff. And, the guy went from calling like 3 or 4 times a month to calling like maybe once in a 6-month period. Sometimes just trying to work the problem with the patient and demonstrating to them that you care about their circumstances is the best way to resolve it.
Yes, sir. I love that. And that's honestly one of the best ways to, I guess everyone says social outreach, but that's, to me, not really social outreach. It's more of a patient care focused task, and you've seen the task that need to be handled and you did it,
Yeah.
So have you ever, or when did you notice that the job was affecting you outside of work?
That's a good question. Generally speaking, I've managed to keep the two separate.
Okay.
And in saying that, I kept the daily grind separate, but I still at home was still very interested in medicine.
Right.
But I kind of left the job at home. I'll tell you one of the most recent examples is when I left 911 2 years ago to work in pediatric critical care. I thought I was doing that because I wanted a big challenge. I wanted a challenge. I wasn't feeling challenged in the job anymore. When I say I thought, I mean, that's why I was leaving, but it didn't occur to me that I may have been burned out. And looking back, I realized that maybe for the last year on the job, I was very dependent. My happiness at the job was very dependent on working with the right people on a daily basis. And when I was put with someone that at the time that I didn't want to work with, I reacted very poorly to that. And I didn't treat that individual very well. And I realized that that was a result of burnout. And that's how it exhibited itself. I needed to be consoled by working with someone that I wanted to work with. And, you know, I've sent the words to that person since then that needed to be sent. But yeah.
Right. And I had the same exact experience, by the way. I went from the truck to offshore, and now actually I'm back in a steel mill. So it was the same scenario for me as I was working, and I got burned out due to COVID and went offshore and did it for 5 years. And I'm like, heck, I'm burned out here now. But just, so has there ever been a part of the job that disappointed you most when your excitement wore off, the adrenaline rush maybe?
I'm not sure that I ever had an adrenaline rush or a waning enthusiasm for the job. I've always been a huge fan of the work and a huge fan of medicine, and I've always been challenged by learning and doing more. And so I don't think the interest or the enthusiasm for the job waned. Ask the question again.
Good. So which part of the job has ever been disappointing, or did disappoint you?
Okay. Yeah, I think, part of the job that was disappointing to me was acknowledging the reality that there are still a lot of people in EMS who are here for the wrong reasons. And I don't want to throw anybody specific under the bus, but there's people. I came in here maybe with almost like a Pollyanna-ish type of viewpoint that everyone is here with virtuous intentions, and they're motivated to do the work and motivated by the work. In reality, there's a ton of people here who are just making widgets, and they didn't get into it because they were passionate about EMS or because they wanted to help people. And there's people who had a choice. I could do this, or I could, I don't know, be a plumber or something like that. They were making a choice between those two fields. I remember having a student who was weighing whether he should go work at Walmart or go work at EMT school. And really the only thing that pushed him towards one or the other was somebody paid for EMT school for him. And so I think, being disappointed that sort of bar for entry existed, and that there were people here who just, were here turning knobs and pulling levers. So I think that was kind of a harsh reality.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Let's see. So as you just said that, if you could talk to yourself at any stage in the career, would you want to warn yourself about anything?
I would warn myself about me and my attitude. I was not a good student in high school. I didn't go to college. And so, and when I say I wasn't a good student, I just didn't apply myself. And so I had no understanding of what my own capabilities actually were. And so when I went to EMT school in my 30s, I suddenly realized that, hey, I'm smart. I can learn stuff. I'm absorbing information. And not only that, but I'm performing at a high level. Like, I led my EMT class, and I led my EMT intermediate class, and I led my paramedic class, and I got high marks on my performances out in the field as a student. And I was cocky when I hit the field. And I would tell my past self, hey, let's come in humble and maybe understand that you don't even know what you don't know right now. I've learned a lot about the Dunning-Kruger effect. And as I've made my way through not even knowing where I was in the Dunning-Kruger of things, and I would want my younger self to know that.
Yes, sir. So kind of leaning into that side of things, what would you tell to a lot of the newer medics that are coming out that are, cocky, arrogant, and they won't listen to their basics or their advanced.
You have to have a degree of humility here because these are people's lives, and there's no room for pride in the field. You cannot protect your own ego. There's actually a book by a guy named Ryan Holiday that's called Ego is the Enemy, and I would recommend that everyone read that book because ego will hold you back in this field. We have to realize in EMS how little we actually know. I mean, we were never intended or never designed to be like actual medical providers. That's what we're evolving towards, but we were intended to be a salvage operation, and we were given just enough information to do that effectively. And now, as we're getting into like a lot more skill creep and the downflow of critical care into emergency care and being part of the basic care bundle of care that we provide, we're running up against the limitations of how we've been educated. And there's a lot of people who have been very challenged in accepting that. And it's because of that pride and that cockiness. And I've had many a partner who, were basics or advanceds who just came out of school and they have all this information right there in their head. And sometimes they've caught some things that I haven't caught, simply because it's a pathology maybe they just were talking about yesterday and I haven't seen in my career. So you just have to remain open to other eyes and other mouths.
I love how one preceptor told me is we're all a larger team, and the paramedic is just as good as his basic.
Sure, yeah.
So as you said earlier, you work pediatric critical care now. I'm sure that carries a different kind of mental weight. So do pediatric calls ever get easier, or do you carry them with a heavier mindset or a lighter mindset?
Do they get easier? The thing is that what I'm seeing in pediatric critical care is higher acuity and different acuity. So the calls that I would see as a 911 provider, on a daily basis would be your year-round would be your traumas, and then your older kids, your asthmas and that sort of thing. But then as we started hitting September through maybe March, it just RSV, all the time, RSV and rhinovirus and that sort of thing. And that could be challenging if they were experiencing significant respiratory distress. But today or tomorrow, when do I go back to work? Tuesday. When I go back to work Tuesday, my call could be going out to an outlying hospital to do what's called a DART delivery, which is where a pediatric patient that hasn't been born yet but has a known cardiac defect is going to be induced. And then we're going to, as soon as that baby is born, we are going to get to work to attempt to stabilize that kid to make sure that they can survive with that cardiac defect until they get to our facility where they can get to the OR. And so that could be something like, I don't know, a coarctation of the aorta where there's essentially a kink in the aorta and no forward flow can be there, or it could be transposition of the great arteries where your aorta doesn't connect to your left ventricle, it connects to your right ventricle, and your pulmonary artery doesn't connect to your right ventricle, it connects to your left ventricle. And so you have two closed loops that aren't communicating. And so I've moved on to some incredibly complicated pathologies. And that does get, I don't want to say easier, but you become more confident over time in what you need to do. But it is still very complex, and you need to think about a lot of things, and there's a lot of spinning plates.
Gotcha. Is there anything harder for pediatric calls that people don't usually think about compared to adults? I know, like you said earlier, kids are smaller adults, but,
I mean, the hardest thing is always having to do things to kids who aren't old enough to be coached, performing, applying things to their face or, putting needles in them or whatever when they're too young to be told you just have to sit still or something like that, or to be comforted into sitting still. I mean, we're not really in a position where we're ordering kids to do anything, but in fact, that's, you're not going to get very far if you're ordering kids to do anything. But it's certainly challenging to deal with very young toddlers and infants, who will simply just protest everything. However, I've learned that most kids, once an intervention is in place, will usually just accept it.
Gotcha. And that actually brings me to this next question is, what sticks longer or harder in your mind, the medicine or the families of the pediatrics that you're dealing with?
Oh, the families can be incredibly challenging. And the medicine is also challenging, but the families can be very difficult. I don't want to say difficult. I don't want to paint the family. I don't want to paint a picture of families being difficult with us. They're right in a terrible position. The thing that they love the most in this world could be very, very sick, and they've had a complete loss of control. And some people are fighting for control wherever they can get it. And we see this everywhere. We all have patients on the ambulance who have lost control of their life or their situation, and they're fighting for that control wherever they can get it. And so it creates a very challenging situation. And parents are fighting for control, and some of them don't see that the struggle that they're maintaining is actually getting in the way of our care, or at least making it difficult to have access to their children to provide that care. And it can be complicated by them knowing a little bit but not enough. Sometimes it can be complicated by them knowing too much because they're in healthcare and they question so much that it actually makes it impossible to pick a good course to chart without failing, or at least giving the picture that we failed. Ultimately, when you go in with humility, you're mostly going to navigate through that. And you never underestimate the value of a well-placed apology. We are so bad at conflict resolution in EMS because we really just don't get training in that. And we tend to take oppositional stances with people very quickly. And what I've learned is that no matter how far that's gotten, you can always stop and say, you know what, I'm sorry. I kind of got on my back feet here and maybe took a little bit of too much of a oppositional stance, and this has gone too far, and have whatever role that I played in this, I just want to apologize. Can we start over? I'm here to take care of your kid, your patient, your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, whoever this is. I'm here to offer the best care I can for them. And I don't want to complicate this with my own pride. And I mean, you can just let all the air out of the balloon with an apology like that. It's not an admission of guilt. It's not saying it's your fault. It's just diplomacy.
Gotcha. So has the pediatric world or the pediatric calls you've ever ran ever made you question staying on the job?
No. I've never been more rewarded as I've been being in pediatrics. Because the thing is that pediatrics, they don't want to be sick. It's easy to have compassion for them and to want to care for them. There's no guile within them whatsoever. They're not creating a situation to be on your truck or to go to a hospital to get a meal or to get a warm blanket or to get out of the cold or to get away from their family or whatever of the reasons that people would consider to be inauthentic for what the adult population uses 911 for. None of that's really there in the pediatric population. And so it's easy. It's so easy to be able to take care with them because none of that is there.
Gotcha. So moving on to a different subject. Earlier you said you leave home and work separate. So what does leaving work at work actually look like for you, if it actually existed?
So when I first got into this, I had a lot to catch up on. And so I would at home take courses, like I took the neonatal and pediatric critical care transport course that's offered by FlightBridge. I read books on the subject. I was always in something. I was going through our in-house course material because we have an in-house advanced airway pathway that you have to take. I mean, you can't just, you're not just hired and you get off orientation and intubate babies. I mean, they're going to ensure that you are competent before it happens. And so there was a lot to study, a lot to be tested on, a lot to rehearse. And once I got there, I mean, that was necessary. But once I got there, then I left that sort of extra work on the job. I mean, when I have downtime, I still do that stuff, but I stopped taking it home because you can't be in the cycle 24/7. It's not fair to have your wife competing with that, you know? And so for me, I don't even know if I'm answering the question now, but
You are.
you know, for me, it just meant, you know, really not thinking about it. I work a 4-shift. I work 4 shifts in a row, then I get 6 days off, and so I don't really think about my job much in those 6 days off. Now, to be fair, if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, which is close to being a full-time job, being an online educator, I mean, I am working as many hours at that as I am my regular job. And even then, I have to turn that off when my wife gets home from work. But if I wasn't doing that, chances are I probably would be picking up a lot of overtime. So I might have been struggling to leave it at work. I may have been, you know, doing what people in 911 do, which is, you know, going for the overtime and never getting out of it.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going is, have you ever, even in 911, did you ever accidentally bring it home with you and, you know, your wife or your kids need something different?
Well, my ex-wife was somebody who worked at the company that I worked for a long time. And I have nothing bad to say
right
in that about her in that regard. But there was a challenge and I thought about this afterwards. There was a challenge of the fact that we were both in the same job, and at one point, you know, we're partners. That you were never done with it, and you know that is a challenge when, you know, your work is going to work with you and coming home with you and in the same bed with you. You know,
I would imagine that would be hard. Yeah, I know, kind of along the lines of how I used to decompress when I worked 911 was I would talk to the kids and the wife about the calls and, you know, the dark humor, the jokes, and it helped me. That's kind of what helped with some of the burnout in the end, was being able to communicate with the family. So
my wife now is not in EMS, and it's very helpful to have someone who, and she's one of these people that's not curious about it either.
Gotcha.
You know, she has no fascination with it. And so, you know, I've dated people, you know, and had friends that, you know, anytime I'm around them, you know, they are curious about what I do and they have questions. And it's not something that's ever interested her to that great of a degree. So that's something that's good for me, is to have someone that isn't compelling me to talk about it. And so, you know, we talk about, we have 2 dogs. And so, you know, we interact with each other over our dogs, and we like working on our house and, you know, decorating and projects and stuff like that, and traveling together and going out to eat together and stuff like that. And so we just have other interests that occupy us when we're together. And that's very helpful for me.
It sounds like it's a lot healthier relationship than you had in the beginning.
I mean, I don't want to contrast
I'm not
anything there.
trying to contrast.
Yeah.
I'm just, it sounds like it for you. It sounds like it's better for your mental capacity, is what I mean. It sounds like,
Sure. I mean,
not like,
yeah, there was all I want to say about when I mentioned my ex-wife, I meant it only in the context that there was an additional layer there, right, of your work not having a clear separation between home and work.
That's what I was saying right there. That's what I was saying. I wasn't downing her at all. I was just saying, you know, you both being in the same field, that would compound the calls. And, you know, I hate to say it, EMS always, it don't matter if you're in a relationship with the same person or not, EMS always has those discussions. Oh, I had this call. I had this call. I had this call.
Mm-hmm.
like you said, if you're around it 24/7, it's not good for your psyche. It's not good for your mental health at all.
No.
That's what I was meaning. I wasn't trying to downgrade. So have you, where'd it go? Sorry, you threw me off with that questioning. Threw myself off with that question. So speaking mentally, psychologically, you've worked the field before. You're still in the field, so you know how everyone feels. How do you know when you're not okay and when you cross a line?
I can tell when I'm not okay. I feel I can tell because I'm a very even-keeled person. I don't get excited very easily, and I don't get I'm not overly confrontational, and tend to. It's particularly when I am challenged by something like acuity or a very intense situation. I actually force myself to slow down, kind of the slow is smooth, smooth is fast sort of principle. And, I believe that speed can kill. A thoughtful approach is, what I would prefer. So when I become heightened and I can feel maybe a little bit of hostility there or something like that, or aggressiveness or a confrontational tone, I know that I am not okay. And I'll even tell someone, hey, I can just tell I'm not in a good place. And I just feel like I'm waiting for someone to start some shit with me, because I can feel myself feeling a little punchy. So that's when I know I'm not okay, is when I can feel myself wanting to go back and forth with someone or can feel that heightened amount of energy.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a lot of us go into that fight or flight mode.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you said you noticed it, but has there been a chance that anyone else has noticed it before you have before? Like the people around you?
Have noticed that I'm not okay?
Yes, sir.
Huh. I don't know if I've ever had someone take me aside because they noticed something was off. I've had people that have checked in because of circumstances,
right?
And that's a good question. I can't remember a situation where somebody had it. Oh, wait a minute. I actually do remember having a call where, this patient this is a long time ago. This patient had overdosed. They chewed a fentanyl patch. That's what happened. They chewed a fentanyl patch and they were, in respiratory arrest, not cardiac arrest yet. And the family denied, and this was before this became something that was prevalent. You would get a Narcan call once every couple of months. This is going back 18 years maybe. But so we did not immediately think of Narcan. We were, I don't even remember what we went through before we got to Narcan, but the mom started like rocking back and forth and saying something, like moaning a little bit. She was so worried, and I found it to be distracting. And I just like, hey, Mom, can you not do that? And I mean, I remember seeing my supervisor, who was also on scene. I remember seeing his head turn, like looking at me, and in my mind, it was like, I don't think he liked that. But he grabbed me later and he asked me if I was okay. And I actually that morning had a huge fight with my wife.
Gotcha.
And and he asked me, "Are you okay?" Because you were an asshole on that call. And so yeah, that I can remember. That's the one time that somebody checked in.
I gotcha. That makes sense. And yeah, it's kind of hard for us to separate mentally that is our home life.
And I've always pursued counseling and therapy regularly, proactively too. And so, I mean, I've gotten regular check-ins on my mental health just as a matter of routine.
And that was actually a question I have later on in a little bit, is what is the best way for providers to start compensating for their mental health, getting over this whole bullshit realm of don't speak about it, don't talk about it, you got to suck it up.
Well, I mean, I think that when you're in a field like this, you should get ongoing and routine counseling.
Yes, sir.
And I think that there are people in there who would scoff at that notion, and I would tell those people that they are probably the amount of depth that a counselor would find there in, I don't want to say maybe pathologies, but things that need to be dealt with would be some very rich soil. And I think that as a field, we would experience a complete overhaul if people just did that on a regular basis.
I think the job would get better, in my opinion, but that's just me. Let's see. So people throw around the word burnout like it just means they're being tired. How do you yourself define burnout?
Well, burnout is when you're not compensating anymore. You know, people go around heightened, and they might be able to do that for a long time. I don't remember the exact way it's structured. There's actually like stress zones, like a green zone and a yellow zone and a red zone. And people can live and there's an orange zone as well. So I think it's like a green, yellow, orange, red. And people live mostly in EMS in that yellow zone, and they don't realize, that if they don't get out of the yellow zone, then they'll get in that orange zone. And if you stay in that orange zone too quickly, then it becomes a red zone where you actually can't unring that bell without professional help. Red zone is a diagnosis. And it's essentially an orange zone, but but now that's where you live. What was the question?
How do you define burnout yourself?
Oh yeah. So burnout is when you basically have failed to compensate anymore. So you're living in that zone where you're heightened, you're stressed, but you're compensating. But now you move to that spot where you've crashed. You're failing to compensate anymore. You're getting grumpy. You're taking it out on people. You're exhibiting behaviors that are not healthy. That is the burnout. And I don't think it's thrown around too much. I think that it's actually not owned enough.
I agree with that. What's the difference between being exhausted and being burnout, which I think you pretty much covered, but.
Well, exhausted is something that you can work on exhaustion while you are in the environment. You can take breaks.
Right.
If you're one of these paramedics who works not with another paramedic, but with an EMT, but you are charting all the calls, despite the fact that there are calls that don't require an ALS provider in the back, but you insist on doing them anyway. And I know that this is a huge problem in EMS that we don't talk about a lot. Are some of these providers obsessively charting all the calls rather than giving opportunities to your partner or giving yourself an opportunity to not? I mean, things like that are something that can mitigate that exhaustion and start, getting some rest back, saying no to some social activities so that you can get enough rest, not staying up all night and doom scrolling on your phone. These are things that you can do to mitigate exhaustion. Burnout requires you to get out of the environment and hit your reset button.
Yes, sir. And I kind of like how you brought that up on the higher level in the back. I know a bunch of people that I've spoken with before have said that it's abandoning your patient if, for instance, you're a paramedic and you have a basic driver. If it's a BLS call, you put the basic in the back. I know myself, I've done it a few times. I don't agree it's abandonment because they're still being treated to the level of care they need.
Well, that's just silly. It's a silly mentality, and there are so many mentalities in EMS that only exist in EMS. Like only EMS thinks like that, right? You go to the hospital right now with some sort of non-acuity,
right?
But you're in an emergency room there. Did the trauma surgeon come see you because you stubbed your toe? No, they let the mid-level provider take care of you, the PA or the nurse practitioner, and the doctor never came in and looked at you. Was that patient abandonment? No, that's absurd. It was the appropriate provider for the appropriate acuity, and EMS is the only one that does this to themselves.
Yeah. That I just found it funny you said that. I was thinking about that. I'm like, wait, sorry, I didn't mean to get off subject, but
well, you can take me wherever you want to go, man.
Oh, I'll go all around. It's okay. ADHD kicks off. So when burnout shows up, how does it disguise itself at first? I can't even speak today.
How does it disguise itself?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if it disguises itself as much as it just negotiates with itself. I'm tired. I'm just this. I'm just that. People. That's a phrase that people repeat all the time. I'm just tired. Just tired. I'm just tired. And we just try to dress it up as something else. It disguises itself as denial.
Gotcha. So
give me a sec here.
Oh, you look.
All right.
It's all good. So have you ever been burnout yourself?
Well, I mentioned, when I left 911 that I realized that I was burned out.
Gotcha.
Have I ever been burnout at some other point in time? I think when I was about 6 years in, I could feel that creeping in a little bit. And I had some other issues going on that didn't help. And so I think it allowed me to be burned out a lot quicker. And I was able to switch from one department to another in the company I worked for. And that helped tremendously. But overall, I've done a good job at mitigating that. Like I said, I've always been someone who's pursued counseling. I find it incredibly helpful. And so I just I've made sure to care for myself throughout my career.
I got you.
Self-care is incredibly important.
So do you think burnout's temporary or is it a permanent hindrance?
Well, a permanence is a diagnosis.
Correct.
Well, I may not want to go that far, but it can be temporary. If it's permanent, it usually means you've reached some sort of critical mass. And it could involve a diagnosis, PTSD or depression or something like that, to where you may be able to manage that because now you're not in the environment, and you may even think that you don't suffer from it anymore. But if you were to go back in that environment, everything would just come back. But I think burnout certainly is something that can be corrected.
Gotcha. And do you think burnout would change the empathy we have towards our patients?
The empathy is one of the first things to go when you're burned out.
Gotcha. No
doubt about it. The burnout and one of the biggest symptoms of burnout is lack of empathy or loss of empathy.
Gotcha. So speaking of burnout, what is a healthy way to help, besides this counseling and therapy, like we said a minute ago, what's a healthy coping mechanism that you would recommend?
I mean, anything that's self-care. You mentioned dark humor before. I think that people need to get away from that sort of what they think is a coping mechanism. Right. Is it a coping mechanism? I guess. Well, no. I mean, it's a coping mechanism. Is it a good coping mechanism? Probably not, because the problem is that dark humor 20 years ago was when you and your partner on the truck, where there was no recording devices present, let maybe a well-placed joke out that let a little bit of air out of the balloon. But now it's become a cottage industry. There are Facebook groups that have hundreds of thousands of people that are participating in this humor that's gone way beyond dark humor. It's become something incredibly toxic, and it's become like a human centipede of coping mechanisms, and you have to get out of that in order to start applying some self-care. So you have to do things that actually bring the best out of you rather than keep you where the worst of other people is.
Yes, sir. Always build yourself better. Don't break yourself down. Let's see where to go. So at some point you stepped into teaching and more of the public visibility. What started pushing you more into the education and public sector of things?
I've always been a teacher. I'm never in a classroom, but I've always been someone that was so excited about learning that I wanted to talk about the things I was learning on the truck. And so I was someone who very quickly became someone the companies that I've worked for wanted to put students with or wanted to precept. And so there was just always teaching. And once social media became a thing, then I started doing things online, just whatever I learned or a new study or something like that. I would put that stuff out there. And it simply was a natural progression on social media. And so once the Reels format really started establishing itself, I realized that there was a huge niche there that I thought that I could fill, which is people who were scrolling all day, these Reels, but not necessarily keeping up on the most up-to-date information out there on their practice. And if I could just kind of sneak it in there a little bit, that maybe I could do something meaningful.
Gotcha. And I will say it's been extremely, as I said earlier, extremely helpful and meaningful to a lot of people I know. Your content is fantastic. And again, you put in your resources, your references, and I love it. I mean,
thank you.
So with that, does it come with more responsibility to you now because it's more visible?
Yes, absolutely. There has been a very steep learning curve. Initially, it was just my personal TikTok page. And I just was talking about the things on TikTok that I was talking about on the truck. I literally just, a discussion that may have happened in a hallway 3 hours prior just became something that I created a reel on, or a question somebody asked me, or something that was on my mind, or something that I'd been thinking about for a while and didn't know how to deliver that message because the format didn't exist yet. And I didn't understand how much accountability there needs to be there. And so there were some times where information was delivered flippantly, a couple of times where I just didn't do my due diligence on looking back at that. And whenever I said something that after the fact, I was like, maybe that needs a clarification, or maybe that's just wrong. I've had to account for it, and that's fine. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are subject matter experts in numerous things, and everyone has those moments. Every subject matter expert can look back and point to, on more than one hand, those moments they were like, "Oh, I really got that wrong," or I misspoke, or something like that. There's a video out there right now that I made about the compatibility of lactated ringers and ketamine, and I guided myself with LexiDrug, which I thought was a great source. LexiDrug is a great source on compatibilities between medications and fluids, and they are listed as incompatible. Oh. But when you go out into the real world, in vivo, which is how things behave in a person, is a lot different than in vitro, which is how things behave together in Petri dishes or, vials. And there's really no compatibility issues between lactated ringers and ketamine in the real world. And I even literally said, you shouldn't be mixing these two medications. And I thought that I had myself backed, with data. But in reality, I didn't search deep enough and talk to subject matter experts on that or do my due diligence. And, it's embarrassing, but you live and you learn. And as long as you're adapting and correcting yourself and acknowledging those things, that's fine.
If I'm not mistaken, I actually seen that video, and you actually re-recorded it later on to admit that you made a fault.
I may have. It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. But
usually if I'm just dead wrong, which I can only remember just a couple times, maybe three times where I was just dead wrong. I'll take it down and then I'll correct it. And I have no problem with that, because the goal is for us all to be in possession of the right information, not for any one of us to be perfect. And if you're expecting your subject matter experts to be perfect, then you're going to be disappointed.
Ain't no such thing as perfect.
No.
Let's see here. So I actually had this question. I posted the interview with you on my personal Facebook post and the podcast page. So I want to slow this down for a second. I've had a few people reach out who had suicidal thoughts. Some did attempt. When they finally asked for help, they were mocked, isolated, or made to fear retaliation. Why do you think our culture still treats asking for help like a weakness?
Because it offends our own sense of whether or not we're okay and whether or not we can cope.
Gotcha.
And it offends our sensibilities and our pride. Like, look, I got through this, so I must be strong, and this person must be weak. Then people develop this inability to tolerate someone who wasn't able to get through what you got through, and it tells me that you probably didn't get through it okay because you lost your empathy along the way.
Yes, sir. And to me, I think we ought to have more of an open conversation with people when they have those issues. Like you said, bring in outside sources, therapists, counselors, whatever. Have EAP programs put into place to help that.
We spend a lot of our time taking care of people who have lost control of their circumstances and who were impacted by events that they had no control over and were exposed to things that they never thought they would be exposed to. And we see the evidence that affects them, either physically or mentally or both. So how is it that these people who have no tolerance for the broken among us, how is it that they can express empathy for the patients the people who are the patients on their ambulance, but they're very brothers and sisters that they are working alongside of? They say, I'm sick now and I need help. And you're not there for them? I mean, what kind of a human being are you?
Right. And I've yet to understand why leadership, for instance, can't help alleviate some of this. Do you have an insight on that?
There's the well, as far as resources in EMS, is not very deep. I mean, just the other day, the head of Health and Human Services, or at least the White House, cut a very important grant that funds substance abuse programs. That substance abuse program itself also provides grants to EMS that, in particular, rural EMS agencies rely on simply to be able to operate. And it would have kneecapped rural EMS. Now, there was universal outcry over that, and hours later they reversed that decision. However, even there were some Medicare changes this year that will affect the compensation for EMS. And we have a resource problem, and we just don't have the resources even to pay people enough, let alone provide them the resources to help to pull them out of the depth that they found themselves in, the dark places that they found themselves in because of the job. And it represents a broken system. And the notion that we have so many questions like that in EMS. How do we fix this, or why don't we fix this? Because there are 17,000 things that we need to fix that are all related. Yeah. And it's like that puzzle that you play where you keep having to slide those tiles, where you can't solve the puzzle until all the tiles are slid around into place. Except this one, you can't ever get to the solved puzzle. You just keep sliding tiles.
Yes, sir. That's a very good analogy. I like that. And so along the same lines, with the whole culture inside of firehouses, the EMS stations, what is the real cost to us as providers keeping this culture alive? not wanting to help one another?
I mean, the culture, I mean, the
It's very far and few between, but I have met a few of them that want to keep the darkness pretty much within the other people. I don't know how to really explain that, if that makes any sense.
well, I mean, the consequence is loss of respect and credibility. We talked about the sleepy paramedic before, and I'm not saying anything that he hasn't heard me say. The joke that he made that caused, that was kind of the impetus to him leaving social media. That, I mean, he was getting doxxed. His family was getting threats. When people see that we don't have empathy for our communities and that they are a source of ridicule for them instead of us being a safe place for them, we lose all respect and credibility. But the people who, and this is anecdotal, but the people who tend to engage in that sort of behavior tend to be the loudest, demanding for respect and pay. The end result is that, we act like disposable human resources, and so we're treated as disposable human resources.
Gotcha. So again, like I said earlier, I had some listeners give me some questions. So the next one comes from multiple listeners. So people are trying to push for change and are terrified of becoming targets for it. Others already asked for help once, got burned, and now feel trapped, afraid to speak up again because it might cost them their career or their reputation. So here's the question. How do you speak up before you're broken? And what do you do if you're already there and asking for help again feels impossible?
That's a really good question. And I just want to, again, acknowledge that some of these questions, some of the answers to these questions are, how do you keep the horse from leaving once the barn door is closed? It's, once they've left, then the barn door is closed. There needs to be stronger advocacy systems within every service. And there needs to be almost like, it's kind of like a game, the games we would play when we were kids, when there was a home base. If you touched that home base, you were considered safe. And there needs to be a home base that you can touch in EMS that considers you to be safe, and you are allowed to activate something that gives you some sort of resource that you need. And so I don't know if that's an advocate within the system or something, but it's almost like a whistleblower system, only you're not trying to get anyone in trouble. You're just trying to get yourself help. So sometimes you need to reach outside of your system and find someone who feels safer than you do in bringing something to attention.
I gotcha. Yeah, like I said, a bunch of people were, I guess, feared of ridicule and retaliation, and that I understand that fear.
But if you fear retaliation, you're not in a safe environment, and so you just need to extricate yourself from that environment. You are very rarely going to change that. You're very rarely going to make a change from within there if you're in the minority. It's simply it's a numbers game, and you're dealing with the law of probabilities there, and so you really do have to get out of that situation and use the safety of not being in a position where they can retaliate anymore to actually speak out.
I gotcha. So I want to come back to something I asked you about at the beginning. After we've talked about everything, as we said, the conversation, what do you want everyone listening to take away today now?
What I want people to take away is that the biggest impact that you can have on the world right now, on EMS, on the world, on the system, on everything, is to actually take care of the person that's in front of you. And that starts with the person that's in the mirror, but then it's also the person that's on your truck. We live in a broken society, in a broken system, where people are struggling with their social determinants of health, They're struggling with people not understanding a holistic approach to healthcare where you kind of understand how our world affects people and how the environment that they live in affects them. Instead of fighting against the people that you're taking care of, if you actually turn your attention towards actually caring for them and taking care of them, everything actually would start to get better. If you want to save EMS, save the person.
Margo, come on.
Yes, sir. So before we wrap up, I want to give you some space on if people want to reach out, connect. I know you said right earlier you don't officially offer classes, but if you were to offer classes and to learn more about what you offer, how or where can they find out more about you?
Well, I mean, my Facebook page is a good place to go because, there's a lot more interaction there. It's easier to interact there, and you can DM me from there as well. I mean, you can DM me on any platform that I'm on, and I'll usually respond. So if you want to know more, you can go there, and you can come see me at conferences. I will be in Texas and Arkansas in February. I'll be actually in Atlanta the beginning of February. In March, I'll be in Chattanooga, Oregon, and Western Pennsylvania. In May, I'll be in Austin. In June, I'll be in Nebraska and Oklahoma. In July, I'll be in Oklahoma. In August, I'll be in Kansas. In September, be in Sweden. So you may not find me there. But I'll be in Orlando at the end of September.
I've got the Sweden part.
Yeah. But you can DMing me and wanting to get more information is the first place to start. If you subscribe to Prodigy, they are allowed to use my content to offer you CE. So I have content on there. Just keep in mind that if you DM me, I get overwhelmed by communications and I try to respond to all of it. But if your opener is just like, hey, then I'm not going to respond to that because I don't trust that. And I don't know what you want when you just say, hey. So in order just to keep my communication as efficient as possible, I just am going to go by that message and not respond to it. And if it's a wall of text as well, and I see that and I can't even see the entire message on my phone or on my computer, then I'll kind of just be like, oh my God, I can't do this. So you do have to be a little bit efficient there. And I'm getting to the point now where I'm probably going to need an assistant to sort through some of this for me. Haven't quite got there yet, but I'm pretty close. But, just reach out. I'll usually answer.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I was surprised that you reached it back out to me. I was honestly shocked and humbled to be able to have you as a guest, and it's amazing.
The engagement is very important to me. I think that, having a dedication to not just putting content out there and forgetting about it, but interacting with people is very important. If you don't know how people feel about things and what they think and how they're reacting to you and the questions that they have of you, then it's hard to create authentic content.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate you being here and being as honest as you are and being you. Sure. You are you, and you don't try to put on a show. You are Jimmy. You're not someone who's just trying to create a show, create, a mask, if you will, of someone else. And that's what I love about your videos. That's what I love about being able to speak with you today is the authenticity of you is honestly 100% perfect.
Thanks.
All right, let me go ahead and hit stop. If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize. best for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Not in this job. Not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.